So last week, our very own Phil argued the need to get more ex-servicemen into jobs. I not only agree with Big Phil, but I think this needs to be extended to all men when it comes to our education system. As a proud feminist and diversity campaigner, I'm often advocating for targets for women in the workplace. However, I believe the reverse is true when it comes to teaching. Women make up 85% of teachers in our nursery and primary school system, and nearly 2/3 at secondary level. This is a significant issue, particularly in inner cities, where many boys don't have a male role model in the home. An increase in male teachers could help address the problems we have with white working class boys and black boys in our schools. Celebrity schools such as LeBron James's I Promise Academy offer a 360 approach that tackles this issue, but also works with local families to help raise aspiration levels of at-risk boys. As a woman, I think it's time to set targets for more men in our schools.
I could not agree with you more, Jean.
What?
I agree with you.
Oh my goodness, I thought you were going to...
No, I think it's really important that we have male teachers.
Thank you.
The only thing that I have an issue with, and it's not necessarily what you've been saying, but the wider debate around this, I've heard a lot of people saying the problem is men aren't attracted to teaching because it's relatively low paid, it's relatively low status, and at the moment the conditions for teachers aren't great. And especially early years teaching has not been professionalised in a way that has the kind of status. Now, I think that's all true, but what bothers me is if that's a problem, then that should be solved, whether it's men or women doing those jobs. The idea that it's fine for women to do low pay, low status, unrecognised good work, but if we want to get men to do it, we need to improve things. I have an issue with that. You know, I think that we undervalue our teachers. We especially undervalue our early years teachers. These are the most important years of a child's life. And, you know, we're thinking at the moment, let's just roll with Brexit. We are at the moment where we're trying to reinvent ourselves. What kind of country do we want to be? If we can't get it together to invest in our young children, then I have no hope for us. And I think these are the conversations we really need to be having about our future.
Well, thank you, Afua. Thank you. I was not expecting that at all. I thought I was going to get...
Well, I'm a feminist, but I'm not anti-man.
OK.
And I'm definitely not anti what children need.
I actually really feel inspired by what you said. Now, I don't usually endorse quotas. I'm not dogmatic about that. I'm not dogmatic. I understand, you know, if an emergency situation is needed, but I don't usually go for quotas. But the spirit of what you're saying is really, really important. And that's what I want to endorse, because of the teachers that inspired me most, and I was expelled as well at the age of 16, 17 from further education college, from East Ham Newham College. I was expelled. And then my mother put her foot down, because I left home at 16. She put her foot down and forced me, and I'm glad she did, to go to sixth form in a grammar school. And the three teachers that stood out till this day that I remember were all male. But I was able to relate to them. They inspired me. And the best results I had got in my education up until that point came from the attention that they gave me. And interestingly, they predicted me grades, one of them an A for economics, and I got exactly what I was predicted, though I didn't believe I would, because I didn't want to let them down. So it really can make a huge difference in inspiring young boys, because you can relate to these men that are, you know, teaching you how to grow up, basically.
Totally.
I think role models are extremely, extremely important. You know, a young man growing up, or a young lad growing up, has got to aspire to be something, and he needs to see what it is at the end of the rainbow. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, he needs a man who can stand there and go, "This is where you're going wrong," and it's for him to sort of like, he's going to make his own mistakes in life, sure, but he's got to see, you know. And when you're talking to someone that's been there, seen it, done it, as a role model or a mentor, he can advise you on the mistakes. He can tell you when you're going down the wrong path. And that. So, yeah, I'd love to see more teachers.
Michelle, before I bring you in, I just want to look at some of the stats around boys, kids being permanently excluded from our schools. So in 2016 to 2017, 6,035 boys were permanently excluded and 1,685 girls. And I do think this has something to do with the issue we have around toxic masculinity and boisterous behaviour. And I think that there are a lot of, and I'm not at all knocking our female teachers, of course not, but I do think there are a lot of teachers, female teachers, who are perhaps intimidated by that sort of behaviour from boys that male teachers would deal with differently. What would you have to say
I think a few different things on this. I'm not a fan of the education system as it stands today, the schooling system. So left to my own devices, I would really like to shake the whole thing up a lot, because I don't really think it's often fit for purpose. I love that I Promise school. I think it's absolutely wonderful what they're doing, and I'd like to see more of those kind of things existing. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing, so the gap, the biggest gap is in early years, as we've just been saying, between men and women. And, you know, there's still a lot of roles within early years teaching which is paying minimum wage, and that really horrifies me, because I think this is such an important, or it should be a very important and valued skill set to have, that we shouldn't be paying people minimum wage. However, I think that there's also a stigma, I think we need to be really honest, about men teaching early year children. And what I mean by that is, I know someone, and I won't name him, he is exceptional with young children. He engages with them, they relate to him, they play, he's exceptional. And I said to him not that long ago, you should get into teaching, you'd be absolutely amazing. And do you know what his response was? No way, people will think I'm a paedophile. That was his response. And you scrunch your faces up, it's still a stigma that exists. It is. When you see a man teaching young children, there are some people that would feel uncomfortable. I wouldn't.
I think that's true. I mean, if you think about nannies, you know, how many people do you know who have a male nanny?
Not many.
And there are
Even
men who want to be nannies,
children,
and often parents won't hire them, because I think people are more concerned about men.
I'm thinking more about the school leaver type child. Do you know what I mean? Now, I mentored a young Russian lad who was about 15 years old. He was finding his parents were multi-millionaires. So I went out to Switzerland and I sort of like looked after him a little bit. Do you know what I mean? That was almost in a nanny role, but for a teenager. Do you know what I mean? Couldn't call it bodyguarding, but it was classed as a mentoring type role. And it's those ones, I think, where the males can get most involved when they're developing, when they're coming into making their final decisions in their development, and you can point them in the right direction then. Granted, I don't think I have a lot of connection with the toddlers, do you know what I mean? I'm great fun. I love my grandkids and all that sort of stuff, but I don't have that connection at those ages. It's when they get a little bit older that I think a man can really do.
Can I quickly show LeBron James's I Promise school? It's brilliant. Wonderful.
Us as adults, we have a responsibility to not let these kids down, to continue to be the teachers, the mentors, to parents, the coaches, the life studies, the life skills, whatever it is, the inspiration, the superheroes, everything, that's our responsibility.
Wonderful.
Well, I mean, honestly, and talking about attracting more men to these jobs, the opportunities and the quality of the profession itself need to be looked at. You know, teaching, like all other public sector staff, have faced cuts. They are overworked and often underpaid. And, of course, to attract young men to this, I think some interesting packages should be offered.
Just to bring you in, there have been schemes that have worked. So in New York, there's the I Teach New York, New York Men Teach. And that was designed to get more African-American men into teaching. And actually what we need is an approach similar to that here, but also to get more white working class men into teaching. Because I think it's about targeting the groups that are at risk.
There is a particular issue around race. The statistic I have is that last year, only 2.7% of male teachers were black. So for black boys, there is a particularly chronic deficit of male role models that they're encountering in school. And black men I know actually often mention a male teacher, even if it was someone that wasn't their teacher, as being someone who had a huge impact on their life.
It's a lifelong impact. One of those teachers that helped me is now the headmaster of the school, and I got till this day, and I will go back to that school when they ask me. It's Westcliff High Grammar in Southend. I go and I'll give speeches, and it's a lifelong impact that you never forget, because it can have a life-changing consequence to your direction.
Can I just quickly bring in, though, when it comes to head teachers, a lot of them are men. I think there's only 38% of head teachers that are female. So we do have men at the top in the head teacher roles. And my teacher was a man. My favourite teacher, I hated school, I was terrible at school, but Mr. Melvin was my business studies teacher. I loved him. I still remember him now.